And let's go over to Matt here. Now, I think you have a completely different slant on the security posture of devices here.
I do. This is a case in where something functioned exactly as expected and, correctly in a sense, but caused a lot of heartache. A company called Hypercom, which is now part of a different company, which is Equinox, both payment processing device manufacturers. Hypercom made a device back in 2004. Using cryptographic signatures, a certificate within the device to ensure that everything was secure. December 7th of this year, these devices all simultaneously refused to boot up after they'd been power cycled. Now, what appears happens here is Hypercom had put in a certificate to expire in 10 years. And this is typically a very good practice. I mean, you want your certificates to be able to expire after a certain amount of time so that someone can't use them, hijack them at some point in the future. It sort of limits the amount of abuse that's possible in a case where they get stolen. But in this case, it seems that no one at Hypercom, or in this case Equinox, which had purchased Hypercom, knew about this impending failure. And so as a result, a number of retailers that were using these devices, power cycled their devices on December 7th, and they were out of business, completely out of commission.
That hurts.
It's their own little version of Pearl Harbor.
Especially this time of year, huh?
Right, December 7th.
Yeah, unfortunate choice of date, absolutely.
Unfortunate, yeah. It seems that Equinox is trying to get people up to date again, hopefully help them install a new certificate. An interesting fact that was in this article, and this is from Krebs on Security, is that at least one of the models in this case is actually no longer permitted to be used in the US because of the PCI requirements. There's some aspect of it that's no longer legit. So it seems like potentially
meet the PCI requirement. Okay.
Some of these devices should really be taken out of commission. It's not clear which models exactly are in this situation, but and it's interesting. One of the affected vendors who was using the devices mentioned that at some point this business division moved from Hypercom to Equinox to over to Verifone, which some people are probably familiar with, and back and forth. And I think it's the churn, it's that non-continuity between the people involved that probably led to the fact that somewhere along the line they forgot that this was an impending problem.
Right. I don't even know where to start on this one. I guess the oversight was, this kind of gets me on a little bit of a tangent here, that, at root, I've been working in security for a long time, but at root, I'm really sort of a systems engineer. And it's been kind of my opinion for a long time that requirements documents are really not something that somebody creates to create a system. It's something that somebody creates because of mistakes that have been made in the past. And so in the requirements for a system like that, really what you want is something that posts a warning. It says, in the next 90 days, your certificate's going to expire, you better do something about it. And it was certainly something that when I had been working on public key cryptography projects in the past, we did exactly that, provided some sort of a warning, and I think there was a 90-day warning or a 60-day warning or something to say, your key's going to expire. If you don't rekey it, the thing's going to shut down. And so that's, I guess, one aspect of this that we kind of need to keep in mind. And incidentally, for folks that might not be familiar, PCI is a payment card industry standards that is contrary to what you may have thought, if you're not already familiar. There are standards around the security for payment card systems, that is the use of credit cards and what the retailers have to satisfy, and there are audit practices around that as well. But that, again, if you read the requirements in the PCI standards, you can probably map most of the requirements, especially if you could have a timestamp for when those requirements were introduced. You could say, oh yeah, that was that breach. And oh yeah, there was that breach. In fact, one of the requirements I think has a lot to do with Wi-Fi security. And if you remember back, one of the biggest breaches, examples that took place about TJ Maxx, had to do with accessibility of the Wi-Fi environment and the point of sale systems being a part of that Wi-Fi network and being able to basically bill for the data. So, and in any case, if you ever get a chance to look at a requirements document or standards, it's actually kind of interesting to go through and see if you can figure out where those requirements fundamentally came from, because usually it has to do with some perhaps not so good experience associated with those systems.
Yep, you get burned, you'll learn.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to mention is that when this initial failure happened, and if it did happen across the board, the initial suspicion was that there was some sort of hack attack involved. I mean, these things were power cycled off, power cycled back on, and they did nothing. The screen didn't turn on; it was just blank.
Yeah. Understandable under the circumstances. I think a lot of folks in the payment card industry, you know, with payment systems and things, particularly if they have perhaps an older one, would be on pins and needles about what the
Especially
or should be
given
on
the
pins
time
and
of the
needles.
year, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You would think that people, especially with the whole, was it Target last year, Christmas
about
time,
this
you know,
time.
had their, you know, people get all kind of, their awareness is elevated, thinking that there might be some sort of hacker,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yep.
impact.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I mean, I guess this is a part of the maybe an attribute of the increasing sophistication of malware. You know, if you recall back, not too many years ago, a lot of the malware, when a machine got infected, it would do some crazy thing, like, it would go to a blue screen and you had to reboot it or something crazy like that. You don't see too much of that anymore. A lot of times the infections are relatively silent, comparatively speaking. I think I'm actually a little bit surprised that we don't see more malware incidents that just brick computers. And brick being, basically turn it into just a piece of junk.
Well, let's hope we don't.
Wipe something. Well, we're not, obviously aren't looking for it to do that, but there would be a legitimate possibility, especially in an embedded system where you may have lots of different versions of the embedded system, which with subtle differences that. They thought they had a piece of malware they could infect, point of sale devices, and then the next thing you know, they've turned a bunch of them into
bricks.
unbootable bricks. So
Yeah,
it's actually perhaps a good sign that they were considering the fact that it could have been a hack attack. But then again, there's always that possibility it's just a failure to operate. All right, good story there, Matt. I think that's actually a very interesting one.